Hello, boys and girls, men and women of all ages. Welcome to the Tech Town Square. James Azar, Eddie Doyle. Eddie, how you doing, mate?
Fantastic, I tell you. And I love it when an American calls me mate because it reminds me, although I've been a guest in North America for 30 years and only 4 years in the US, it reminds me that, oh, yeah, that's right. I am a little different. I'm used to the way you talk. No one's used to the way I talk. So it's all good, my friend. And we're living in an exciting time. What's the date today? November the
10th.
10th. The
Tomorrow's
10th.
Veterans Day. Today's the Marine Corps' birthday. So happy
Happy birthday, Marine Corps.
245th birthday to the Marine Corps. Semper Fi.
And thank you too. Now, a friend of mine who was part of wasn't Greenpeace, it was the other big one, the Peace Corps. Well, I think it was called Peace Corps.
Yeah, Peace Corps.
So he in his youth, he was in Peace Corps and very much rah rah, and that's cool. And they've got their place. He read a book. Now he works in Wall Street now, and he read a book. And the premise of the book was this: the U.S. Marines have done more for world peace than Peace Corps have. Now it's like, I can already hear the people
Oh no, the
screaming.
leftist ears are burning. No,
Turn these
not
guys
with
off.
guns, not with guns.
Just think of it. Let's put it in real simple terms. Playground bully, right? How do you stop a playground bully? It's the big guy. The big guy stops. You can't reason with the playground bully. Have you read Lord of the Flies? We've all read Lord of the Flies. This is how it works out with kids. Here's another shocking statistic. I got this from a Canadian psychologist called Jordan Peterson. He asked the question, who's the most violent demographic of human? And I started thinking, oh, yeah, okay. And he said, 2-year-olds. It's true. They bite and kick and scream. And they take stuff. They don't understand the rules. That's Lord of the Flies. And so, unfortunately, a lot of this planet is kind of Lord of the Flies. And unless you got a big guy with a gun who's a decent guy, it's Lord of the Flies. You can't reason with them. So thank you, Marine Corps.
So I'll tell you this on the podcast. I don't know if you've been catching on my other podcasts. I'm doing Veteran November, and I don't know if you've caught any of those episodes yet, but you should.
Yeah.
They're 30-minute episodes, and I talk to veterans that are currently in information security, cybersecurity, vendors, practitioners alike. And tomorrow I have Gary Haslip on, the CISO over at SoftBank, formerly of Webroot, formerly of a bunch of different companies. Gary's a legend. He's written so many books, but it's inspiring. Like, I'm inspired, and I'm a veteran, and I'm inspired by my fellow veterans, by the path they chose to take, by the road they go down. Like, I'm inspired by them. They're awesome.
Yeah.
They're amazing. They're brave men and women. They're selfless. They're all about the mission at hand. And when you talk about our armed services, of course Marines did more for world peace than the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
Because the Peace Corps doesn't do peace. It's like the UN Human Rights Council. It does nothing for human rights. The U.S. does more for human rights than the UN.
Right. They feed people, right? That's what the Peace Corps does. They feed people. They try to influence policy.
It's a fake name. They don't influence policy.
Yeah.
It's just, look, I mean, when I was in the service, we met a lot of these organizations. And yes, the people that go to those organizations, they mean well. They want to feel like they're changing the world. And they're good-hearted people. But then they get into it. And in a lot of countries, there's a lot of corruption and a lot of local things. And, when we were in the service and we were deployed, Eddie, we were given strict orders to never interfere with local conflicts. So you see 7 people beating up a guy, and they're going to kill him and hang him. Can't do shit about it. If you do, you get court-martialed. That is their problem. It's local. Don't get involved, right? But that's because you don't want to get into you don't want to start adjudicating their internal conflicts that they've been having for hundreds, if not thousands of years in different parts of the world. And we are so arrogant. We're so arrogant. And this is one thing. We're so arrogant to think that we can go to different parts of the world and bring to them democracy or a version of capitalism or a version of socialist capitalism in a way, and watch them take it. So I'm a firm believer in geopolitics, right? We spoke about this and when we talked about the social dilemma, right?
Right.
And the different geopolitics that go around, someone from Louisiana in the States to someone from New York, right? They're two different people. Yes, they're both Americans. They both carry an American passport. They both have the right to vote. They both have the right for the Second Amendment. But one of them values those rights a little bit more than the other guy.
Sure,
Right?
they're different people. Yeah, that's
But
right.
they're different people, and so when you look at like Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, those places are tribal.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I think that it's a matter of this is how do I put this without sounding completely patronizing? It's a certain level of maturity and growth one needs to go through, and it's painful. I mean, look, the Western Great Renaissance, right? When Gutenberg in 1440 invented the printing press, 200 years later, that community around Germany and Austria, and so therefore Europe and Western Europe, gave birth to this amazing renaissance. It was the first time in human history that the mass dissemination of knowledge was available. And it gave birth to Spinoza, Newton, right, Galileo, all these incredible scientific and philosophical discoveries and advancements. And we get what we have today in the West. Well, guess what? It wasn't just, people being enlightened. Galileo was caught and strung. I mean, his body was severed into 4 pieces and sent to the 4 corners of the Vatican or whatever it was. I've got that roughly right. I mean, blood was shed for this. You have to unfortunately take it by force. That's rough. And I just don't see anywhere in history where utopia just sprung into position and everything just went well. So we got to let those folks just get on with it, and it's going to be a rough ride.
So yes, but just know that what we did by force, other believes that they can do the same by force. That's the vision of Antifa.
No, not us taking it by force. What I mean is, let's pick on Iran, for example, right? The Iranian people, if they want to have a democracy, us coming in there and just kicking ass, let's say, and trying to make it happen is not going to work. It has to come grassroots from the beginning, and those people are going to have to take force from their dictators.
So let's talk about that for a second, because in theory, that's true. In actuality, that's it's funny. I was watching people celebrate this week the fake election results that people feel like are happening right now, right? No state is certified. The Real Clear Politics, which is the most neutral of all websites when it comes to election, called it and then reversed it. And now Biden has 254, but no mainstream media is willing. They were fine with Real Clear Politics when it served their narratives, but they're not. And that takes me to the whole idea of what socialism and dictatorship is all about. All these Hollywood celebrities that are like, great, yippee. And I'm like, you fucking idiots. Okay, sorry, we're going to have to mark this episode explicit at this point. No kids can listen.
We're already off, yeah.
They're going to come to you first before they come to me. They're going to eat you up, spit you out. There's nothing that you can do. Right. The Hollywood person who thinks that they're going to still live in their Malibu mansion, make the millions and millions of dollars in entertainment under a socialist America that gives equality. Listen, if the idea of equality is great and one that we need to strive for, but not the equality of outcome, the equality of opportunity. When I want to give you an equality of outcome, then that's no longer equality. That's communism. That's socialism.
Right.
This country doesn't say you're equal to the outcome. You're equal to the opportunity. Like Michael Jordan, there were 100 other basketball players that some were better than Michael Jordan, but they didn't seize the opportunity.
Sure, that's right.
Now, imagine if you gave all of them equal outcome like Michael Jordan. How special would Michael Jordan be?
Well, and moreover,
he'd be LeBron James.
You can't, because we are not born equal. That's just the reality of it. We spoke a little bit actually in the Social Dilemma about a very controversial topic of IQ. People are born. Stephen Hawkins, right? That brain was born. And of course, he took advantage of opportunity, right? And he worked at it and grafted, etc. And the poor guy had a lot going against him, and he made it. I'm not going to be a Richard Hawkins. It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to be a basketball player at 5'11". Right? It's not going to happen. So in actual fact, the world is not fair. And we just have to swallow that.
If it's equal opportunity of outcome that they want, then Eddie, if you want to be an NBA player, I don't care how tall you are, equal opportunity of outcome, you go become an NBA player, Eddie. You don't take nothing. You don't take shit from no one. You email Kamala Harris right now and let her know, Miss Vice President elect, I'm being discriminated against. You've promised equality of outcome. I want to play in the NBA. I want to play for the New York freaking Knicks, and I want to be an MVP. Make it happen. Quality of outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what that means.
Well, and let's pull it back then to my example, because I struggle with understanding, how are they going to give birth, let's say, in Iran, to a renaissance? In other words, to stop with Sharia law.
I mean, so before I went off on my tangent, I'm glad for you bringing me back. So you're going up against a system that is surveilling you, that puts you down before you're even able to get up and pick up some steam. Now, there was that perfect storm. That perfect storm was in 2009 during the Green Revolution. And then Obama didn't... All Obama had to do was say, we support the Green Revolution. Done. It would have brought another 2-3 million people into the streets. Now, that's
interesting, because look what happened when Trump moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I think that was a massive signal saying, hey, we are behind Israel. We're behind this state. And now what, 2 years later, or less than 2 years later, we're finally seeing, actually, I'll look it up as you chat for a second, because I interrupted you there, James. We're finally seeing, I think in the United Arab Emirates, they're doing something. I'm going to look it up because I can't quite remember. But right, I think I'm on the same lines as you, right?
The UAE and Israel signed a peace agreement. I mean, Trump gets credit for the peace agreement. Obama gets credit for bringing them together, because his failed foreign policy, his shitty foreign policy of cozying up to dictators and ayatollahs in Iran, that while we signed the Iranian nuclear deal, the JCPOA, right, we're chanting in the streets, death to America, death to Iran. And you're signing a deal with those people thinking that somehow, somewhere, you're going to be in a better place is absolutely ridiculous, and shows the low IQ on Barack Obama and like his just blinded ambition to think that if you do something different, maybe you'll get a different outcome. No. He always tried to say, like, the thing about insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same outcome. And you're like, yeah, only... Different. That's right if you're trying to do something, but we're talking about Iran here. These people burned the American flag. They have the American and Israeli flag painted on the floor to their universities, to their schools, to their government buildings, so that when people walk in, they step on those flags. So, that's indoctrination. The way to beat this indoctrination is to free the people who don't want to be indoctrinated by those dictators. And those people do need support. The uprising, yes, has to come from within, but it requires outside support.
Yeah.
So especially in today's age.
So had Obama got behind the potential revolution over there, maybe it would have been different. I suspect so, after using my example of Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It would have been different. So now you bring up an interesting point, though. When the Renaissance started, roughly late 1400s, but really kicked off in the 1600s, right? A couple of hundred years later, we didn't have Twitter and instant anything. And governments, they were powerful, of course, but not in the same way a dictatorial regime could be today with social media, right? Let's drag it into tech. This is the tech town square. And so, today... Well, the people, though, they've got the technology. And obviously, Twitter and Facebook was a big part of that when the Green Revolution was potentially going to really push things forward. So, it's going to be interesting. I think I'm still standing my ground then. The people in those beautiful countries and the beautiful people need to stand up themselves against their own dictators. And it's going to take shedding of blood back to the U.S. Marines, right?
Well, yeah, I'm not for. I am on the Tulsi Gabbard, Dan Crenshaw, Donald Trump train here, which is we don't want to be. It's funny. I saw an image the other day, and it said the presidents and their wars from the 1960s. Okay. You know what president hasn't had a war in his first 4 years?
This one, Trump.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah, I know.
No war. no conflict, no sending troops in a support mission to Libya without congressional approval like his predecessor did. Not Kosovo, not Iraq. Afghanistan was called for, Iraq was not. We can debate that point all people want, but if we go back to technology, and I'll go back to what you were saying, you're right. The Iranian regime will shut down Twitter, will shut down all the messaging apps, will unplug the internet they'll just go to the plug that powers all the internet in Iran and unplug it, and those people can no longer organize. Right? Yeah. So those people need tools to help them organize and continue to organize when the heavy hand of the dictator's coming down. People forget what if we look at the most recent dictatorship that got overthrown by the people, it was Ceausescu in Romania.
Is that right? I didn't know this. Go on.
1992, 1993. So Ceausescu built this. If you've never been to Bucharest in Romania, it's a beautiful city. And Ceausescu used all the people's money to build a governmental palace building that was bigger than the Pentagon.
It's unbelievable, isn't it, these guys?
And he went out to give a speech in front of the entire country. And they brought all the people to support him because there was opposition. And this was when the revolution will not be televised. Remember that?
No.
So the revolution will not be televised. Well, this revolution was televised. Ceausescu's in the middle of a speech, and the people start booing him in the middle of his speech. And it's on state TV. And they stop the feed because they don't want people to know that he's being booed. But it was too late. They've already heard it. People came to the streets. They tried to get Ceausescu out of the country. They couldn't. The helicopter ended up landing, and Ceausescu got a field. He was marshaled and adjudicated in the field and was shot by his countrymen, him and his wife.
Wow. Yeah. What's the palace used for now?
It's still a government building now, but I think it's pretty much the entire Romanian government's housed in there.
Let me look it up. Yeah.
It
is. It's still used as a government building. That's right. And it's gorgeous. Look at that. Wow.
It's yeah. I mean, Ceausescu, for a dictator, right? He built Bucharest to be like the favorite things from all his favorite European cities. So it has a river that looks like Paris. They have things that remind you of Brussels. They have parts that remind you of London.
They just have such imagination, these people, don't they? It's unbelievable to me, when you've got literally oodles and pots of gold that I think I'm just going to replicate something I've already seen. Like, where's the... I mean, honestly, it's fine.
Well, welcome to the new world of stuff like that. I mean, there's extensive challenges in that. But if we look at, let's talk a little bit about what's happening today. It's November 10th. According to 74 million dead and alive Americans, Joe Biden's president. According to 71 million alive Americans, we have questions about the fact that people are claiming that Joe Biden is president.
So, and let's stop right there because I've been back in the US 4 years, and I'll tell you what, this country fights for its rights. And I love that because it shows me that the people value their rights. They value the individual. And this is what the West got right, the individual, not the collective. And the the best example of that is the United States. And so, that's the first thing. Coming in from the outside, it's like, there's a hell of a scrap here. What's going on? Now, the first thing, when we say contest election results, I lived in Canada for a couple of decades, lived in England for a couple of decades. I'm also a French citizen. I'm very familiar with them. They would never contest election results. That thought in and of itself just seems crazy. So the first person that says, I'm going to contest, seems a little crazy. So let's just start there. Why would we start contesting the results? What evidence, what true thing do we have that we might say, hang on, I think it warrants a full investigation? So let's start at this piece.
So let's start with anomalies, all right? And I like how you compared this to Canada, the UK, and France. So France has had contested results, but they typically end up out of it. Like they don't end up surfacing in a level like what we're seeing now. Now the country is very polarized. This from 2016 on out, this country has been polarized. There's a lot of reasons for that. You know, and you know, people will debate me on why and who and what.
Sure.
In England, it's very different. England is also a two-party system, but then within the two parties, there are factions.
Okay.
So on the conservative side, there's a bunch of factions. There's, you know, the Nigel Farage wing that used to be there that led the Brexit movement from the conservative movement, right? And you've got the traditional conservatives, and then you've got your more center-leaning conservatives. And the same thing is on the labor side, right? You've got the anti-Semitic, communism-loving people on the labor side, but then you've also got the center part of the labor that are liberal, that believe in, you know, government maybe taking more care of them, but they're more liberal in their beliefs, but they're not leftist, they're not anti-Semitic, they're not Islamophobic or anything like that. They're just liberal in their leanings, right?
Okay.
And in the UK, that comes out in factions, and predominantly those factions are geographical, right? So, you know, typically people who come from very integrated neighborhoods go to the Labour, and they are very leftist, and they kind of, you know, have those specific policies and so forth. And the Conservative Party is predominantly representing the people outside of the big cities, the rural voters. You can almost say the Conservative Party is like the Republican Party, and the Labour Party is like the Democratic Party. Sure. Now, here's where the US is learning from the UK. And here's what I believe 2020 will mean further down the road. It's going to be the end of the two-party system. This is the beginning of the end of the two-party system in America.
Okay.
Meaning we're starting to see the social media, the ability for more people to run for office, the ability to have people like, you know, AOC in office, or people like Dan Crenshaw in office, or Ted Cruz. You know, Ted Cruz was a Tea Party guy. That was the original kind of anti-Obama movement within the Republican Party. But then the Republican Party brought the Tea Party within and adjusted and built. And so they've kind of, I don't want to say eliminated the Tea Party, but they quarantined it.
Okay.
The Democrats are now trying to quarantine the Bernie Sanders socialist communist left. But they're not able to quarantine it. So now the entire party has jumped ship. Meaning you hear Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, people who were traditionally liberal in their leanings have now all of a sudden become socialist and fascists. Mm-hmm. And so, and I don't say that lightly, but when you hear them speak and you hear their vision for America, it's very similar to a socialism, fascism type of governance. And that's what's scary.
And I do agree with you. Here's the problem, though. You have to look for that information. So if people haven't heard it, because you're not getting it from mainstream media, and then you
do get it, but they spin it. You do get it, but they spin it.
So then people hear a statement from you using the words fascist, right, and socialist. They're like, So that's the thing that I'm trying to figure out, how we can use technology to not have that, because people make a statement. And people don't just consider, they alienate.
So you bring up a really good point, and we can have this. It's a really, really good point. And so social media in its inception was supposed to be the town square. That's why we call the show the Tech Town Square, right? This is supposed to be the place where people can come in and debate. And as we launch this show right now, we don't have a lot of listeners, but I'm sure as we grow and more people tune into our show, more people will engage with us, and some people will call me stupid, and some people will not call you stupid. They'll say you're very smart because you have an accent, and that tends to give you a little bit more wisdom, apparently, in today's media. You ever notice like John Oliver, like, oh, John Oliver's so smart. I'm like, the guy's like the dumbest asshole on the planet. Like, he's a comedian. He's literally a guy who used to do stand up at 2:00 in the morning and wash dishes to make a living. Right? Yeah, he's got a show, but he's not a political pundit. He's not a historian, right?
Well, famous. So there's a trick in psychology which happens to us with famous people. So famous people typically are aesthetically quite pleasing. That's another trick, by the way, right? The Brad Pitt type face. And so when a famous person says something, we are programmed from childhood to know that authority. So, and this is a famous person, has something. They have something we don't. And so people tend to look up and go, oh, famous, therefore true.
But that's what you're seeing in social media, right? So social media was supposed to give the common man a voice. And for a little while, it did. It gave, MySpace, Facebook, first Twitter gave the average man a voice.
Right.
And then they grew. And then they became a platform. They monetized. And then celebrities came by.
That's when the celebrities.
And then, think about this, right? There are celebrities who have lost fans. There are companies who have lost customers because of social media. Now, they don't feel it yet, but the great social media migration is happening right before our eyes, and it started on November 3rd.
All right, go on then. Explain that. What do you mean by that?
So Nike can come out and do a critical race theory commercial and say Black Lives Matter and throw out a bunch of virtue signaling, and it wouldn't have an effect on their bottom line because all those people were like, oh, look how awesome Nike, they did a BLM shoe. And you're like, you're an idiot. They only did that to sell you a freaking shoe. And they're selling you a shoe for $150. Now, if they were all for your cause, they would make that shoe at cost plus maybe 10%. But they're not.
And clearly on the other side of the shoe, they should put, but sweatshop kids' lives don't matter.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is why it's virtual signaling, because they don't actually care. I wish people get that.
There's hypocrisy in that statement. But here's why I think all the virtue signaling that's been happening by major corporations is starting to fade away. And so it started on November 3rd. What's the number one social media app for 6 days running since November 3rd?
Is it Parler or something like that?
Parler.
Right. That's cool. I didn't know. I just took a stab. Yeah, that's cool.
Millions of users.
I see a lot of Twitter people saying, that's it. Screw it. I'm out of here.
I'm out of here. Twitter, Facebook people.
Because they can't trust the children that have control over accounts so that they can and cannot manipulate the data, which is bizarre to me.
So in my podcast, I used to get on Facebook, I'd get probably 50 to 75,000 people watching, like engaging with my content. Now I can barely get 10,000. I go to Rumble day one, I get 20,000.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? So there's an aspect to censorship. And so we're watching this main media migration. And what's going to happen for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Google is people are now going to go search on DuckDuckGo like we do on this show. Right? They're not going to use Google anymore, which is going to drive more advertisers to go to DuckDuckGo and spend less money with Google. Now, brands that are synonymally advertising with Facebook are now going to reduce the money that they spend with Facebook and go to Parler. Because guess what? There's 50 million users in Parler that are willing to spend money. I say Parler will have over 100 million users by the end of this month.
Wow, man, I tell you, I want that to be true. I don't think it's going to be, because I think that the numbers are just so great at Twitter and Facebook.
You're right, but Twitter and Facebook is global. And what you're forgetting is Parler and Rumble, and we'll talk about Rumble here in just a second, but Parler isn't going to censor you, right? Parler isn't going to take that Iranian dissented and censor his account like Facebook and Twitter do, like when the Iranian government takes Twitter down.
Right.
Parler is going to be like, hey, this is a platform of free speech, not hate speech. Right. We're not going to censor what you say unless you're spewing hate speech.
And here's where I think I'm going to share my screen. I'm not sure it's going to work in this format. So if I do this, yeah, you can just about see it, and you can almost see me. I'm down here anyway, but here I am. Yay. Okay, so I don't know if that shows fully, but do you remember this? This was a
Give
hack.
me just a moment. I'm going to put you full screen. Now people can see you.
There you go. Lovely. Thank you. So there was a hack on Twitter. This was actually the date's right here. This was July 15th, 2020. So July 15th. And within 2 or 3 hours, this thing happened. Now, here's what's interesting. Twitter was hacked by threat actors, whatever, threat actors somewhere in the world. And they hacked Twitter employees. It was actually through a phone spear phishing campaign initially. They got their credentials, and these employees had admin access to high-profile accounts like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Barack Obama, a whole bunch of other people. Now, here's the first question. How is it some employee, just some employee that got hacked, and there was a whole bunch of them, has access to their accounts? But they sent out these tweets, a scam, saying, hey, I'm feeling generous, and if you give me $1,000 in Bitcoin, I'll give you 2,000 back. Oh, it's some ridiculous scam. Anyway, I'm sort of covering a lot of this up because my employer's on here, and this show does not represent my employer. It represents James and I. And so here is what happened in 3 hours. They got $118 million from people. $118 million. So right here, Elon Musk's went out. Of course, it's fake. It wasn't Elon Musk. It was his account. It wasn't him. Then Bill Gates, Uber, Apple, there's Joe Biden, there's Kanye West, right? All these various rich people, all the way up here, 118 grand. Now, my point is, why on earth is Twitter allowing employees to have admin access to accounts of people like the former president of the United States? So to me, there has to be a reason in which that person needs to sometimes access their account or do something. Why?
So I don't know the why. And I don't want to speculate on the why, because I don't want to speculate. I want to go back to what we started talking about, which is you've been in this country for 4 years. People here are fighting for their rights. Right. And I want to take it back to the Parler conversation. And I want to take it back to the grand shift. And what we're going to see in this country is a great economic shift from big tech. And if you remember in the social dilemma, we talked about regulation.
Right.
And we said, do we regulate them? Yes or no? And I said, let competition be the trigger. So like you and I know, we work in technology. COVID helped us transform to a work from home society. A lot of companies are telling their employees, work from anywhere you want.
Right.
So you're at home, I'm at home. We're not in an office anywhere. We're probably never going back to an office to begin with, but here we are, we're home. And we're talking. And that's changing the way that people shop, live, work. It's changed our lifestyle, right? We work a little bit more, but we take more breaks. We have less time to commute. So we're putting less mileage on our cars. Our cars are depreciating. This is going to have a profound impact.
Yeah, commercial real estate in the cities. I mean, it's
cars.
On and on.
I mean, the most common thing that people buy is cars, and people typically buy a new car every 5 years, right? Because you put mileage on your car, an average of 20 to 25,000 miles a year is what an average American puts on his car, right? Well, now that's down to 8,000.
Well, and here's what I did. So I moved back to the US 4 years ago. My main criteria was I want to be on a single train line to Manhattan. That's my office. I want to be close to an airport. I travel all the time, and I just do not want a 2-hour drive after a 14-hour flight. And I want an amazing school for my kids. Otherwise, I don't care where I live. We found a place with that criteria, and we thought, can we live? We're a family of 5. Can we live with one car? So we decided we'll just bring one car down. If we have to get another car, we'll go buy one. Didn't need to. So every time we need a double car, take an Uber. And while that sounds like, $50 an Uber, $100 an Uber, at the end of year 1, I'd spent less than $1,000. So choice. Do you want 50 grand sitting on your driveway plus insurance plus everything else? Or do you want to spend $1,000 a year? So things are shifting because of that. Things are shifting because of COVID, and technology, Uber, right, is allowing us to have options that we didn't have before.
Right. So we'll go back to Parler and the great social media shift. So we saw on November 3rd, leading up to the election, the number one top rating news station was Fox News. Fox News was crushing everyone in ratings.
Yeah.
It wasn't even close. As of yesterday, what's the number one news station in the country?
Don't know.
CNN. What's
Really?
number two? NBC. What's number three? Fox News. Where did all the Fox News crowd go? One American News Network, OANN, and Newsmax.
Really? Why? Okay, but hang on. I need a why. Why all of a sudden next to this over a couple of days?
So here's the deal. Let's talk about the elephant in the room.
All right.
The election hasn't been called.
Yeah.
CNN, NBC, and the AP don't get to decide who the next president is. They can call it based on whatever reasoning their decision desks have to do, only that their decision desks are employed and powered by former Democratic staffers that go to work for TV networks.
But
so
Fox, why Fox though?
Fox's decision desk is run by a former chief of staff of a Democratic congressman.
Yeah, and do you see what they did yesterday to Trump's press secretary? Just cut her off in mid-sentence. It blew my mind.
Yeah, they cut her off mid-press conference. So you have to understand that people see the media do this and are walking away from the media.
Good.
They're walking away. So now they went, I want to go to someone who's going to give me what I need to know. Because they're covering it up. In the history of this country, the media used to call elections, and that has been the standard because the media and the decision desks were truthful. And they never competed for who to call it. In fact, if you go back to the 60s, 70s, 50s, etc., before the era of the internet, all the decision desks in every network had a phone line to each other. And they were like, hey, we're going to call Arizona. You going to call Arizona too? We're calling Arizona. We're calling Arizona. We're calling Arizona. Everyone's calling Arizona. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Everyone calls Arizona. Okay, you're calling California. Boom, boom, boom. Everyone's calling California. Every once in a while, one network would pre-call a state because they got some information from the other to get a rating push so more people tune in to their channel. But predominantly election night coverage was election night coverage. You tuned in because you wanted to watch the anchor that you enjoyed hearing from.
Sure.
You didn't tune because it wasn't a contest of who's going to report what first. You enjoyed the analysis and the anchors that were in the room.
So I can verify this because I experienced it firsthand on November 3rd, right? 4th. I went down to DC with a bunch of friends, and it's okay. Let's just take a quick 3-minute digress for my story here because this blew my mind. I love DC. So I take the train, right, from New York down to DC. I do it a lot for business, obviously during COVID. I haven't done it all year. So I get on the train. I'm really excited. I'm like, all right, fantastic. I arrive at Union Station. I get out, and I love to walk. So I love to walk through the Capitol, through the mall, all the way down to where the White House is. And I usually stay at a hotel somewhere around there. So this time I got out. I started to walk. What did I see? Boarded up windows. Just from Union Station, nowhere near the White House, right? All the way down. So in the end, I didn't bother walking on the Mall, and I walked on Constitution, all the way down to the White House, hit Pennsylvania, and boarded up the whole way. So that's the first thing. So then I got there and thought, okay, well, and this was my first election time in DC and with a bunch of friends, and they go there for every election because they just want to celebrate it and enjoy democracy, the heart of democracy, I like to call it. There wasn't one party. Now, look, I have to say, there were parties. I'll come out on air and I'll say, I would be a Republican, absolutely. Okay, so that's me. And I say would be simply because I'm a guest to your country, so I don't get to say, right, as a non-citizen.
But you believe in a republic, you believe in the GOP's values.
Absolutely, yes. Okay, yeah, today, 2020, I would absolutely look at the GOP values and weigh them between the two and go.
And if those happen to change, and in 10 years the Democratic values match your values, you'd probably be a Democrat. That's right. Okay. That's the beauty of our democracy.
Exactly. So I don't like to label myself. But anyway, there were no parties for us specifically. Now, we were actually going to be at the Trump Hotel for a party. I was so disappointed with a bunch of the White House insiders. Got canceled, right? Secret Service said, forget it. You know what? There's going to be too much violence. So we drove in an Uber about 50 minutes by the time we could find a bar that had some TVs that were showing, because the bars were closing. They were open for lunch, and then I was there. We're just going to close, and they boarded up their doors and their windows. So anyway, we got to this place in Fairfax. And there was 2 TVs in the bar, a CNN TV and a Fox TV. All right, fine. And we're walking between each. And I was with, though, a colonel from the military who works in the White House. And he was right there with the press secretaries and everything else on his text saying, oh, they just called it for such and such. But they weren't showing it on Fox if it was called for Trump, and vice versa for Biden if it was called for CNN. And this, if it was called for Biden on CNN, this confused me. And then I realized they just want to keep you glued to the screen. So they actually purposefully delayed the news on calling certain states in order, because you're like, I'm so anxious. Is this going to happen or isn't this going to happen? So yeah, it's about keeping eyeballs glued to the screen so that we can satisfy our business model. That's what news is. All right.
Well,
I digressed with my story, James.
Well, it's a narrative, right? But that brings us, that's great that you bring this up, because it goes right into the point I was trying to make. And what I was kind of, the people got sick of it. The people don't want to be given a narrative. Yeah. Here's the deal. When I watch OAN, when I watch One American News Network or Newsmax, I know where they stand. They're not saying we're partial journalists. They're saying we're a conservative news station.
Right.
We support conservative causes. We're going to give you the conservative point of view to the news you say. So my advice to CNN, Fox News, NBC, CBS, ABC, the old media, because that's what they are. They're old media. They're Joe Biden. They have amnesia. They forget where they are. They mumble words. They talk about their hairy legs around children. They do all kinds of wacky stuff. You know, come out and say who you are.
Right.
Don't pretend to be impartial.
Yeah.
Don't pretend to be impartial. The fact, and they showed their true colors when this election got called by them. All of a sudden, people crying on TV, giving these impassionate speeches. And you're like, and I'm supposed to believe you when you tell me that he's a really bad orange man?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly the point.
You're not partial. You want us to believe that you are, but you're not. You're not partial. 71 million Americans voted for Donald J. Trump. 75 million Americans allegedly voted for Joe Biden. I believe that number is more to 72 or maybe 73 million at most, but he would still lose the Electoral College when it's all said and done.
We're going to get into that in a few moments, I hope. Yeah, because I want to make a point here about no, go on then. Keep going.
So if you don't mind, I'm just going to finish my point. So we have, people saw this that night, and people went to sleep. The election wasn't called. Every news media outlet said the election isn't called. But you went to sleep, and Trump had a lead in 6 states. A decisive lead in 6 states. And then all of a sudden at 4 a.m., across all those states that he has a lead in, his lead shrinks miraculously, and in some of them, Biden's on top. And now here's the deal. If you're free and fair media, why are you not questioning how 150,000 votes come through and they all go to one candidate? How is that not fishy?
Right. The probability does not work. Any mathematician would tell us that.
There's mathematicians who's done this and have said that this would be like an equivalency of baseball. It would be like having 8 games, a pitcher pitching 8 straight games, and they're all no-hitters.
Right.
It's hard enough to do one.
Let's go buy
nevertheless to do 8.
Yeah.
And all these ballots show up in the middle of the night. The next day, people are talking about irregularities. People who work there, whistleblowers come out, and they're quieting these stories.
Yeah.
The news media's job is to investigate what's going on. Their job is to hold people in charge accountable, but they're not because they're biased.
Right. I think people know their bias, and I think people simply want to join a club, and whatever that club says, if it ratifies what they're currently feeling, right, not necessarily believing, just feeling, it makes me feel good to be a member of this club, I kind of don't care what they're saying. Right?
But that's number one. That's the number one rule in big government ruling over people and the beginning of socialism and communism. Get people to separate from religion, from community, and get them to vie allegiance to a political party. When you do that, you lose. Your values no longer become your values. Your values now are the political party. Your allegiance is to people who are flawed and corrupt to begin with on both sides of the aisle. Let me be crystal clear. I am not saying that Donald Trump is perfect. Donald Trump is far from perfect. I have issues with some things that Donald Trump does. But do I believe he lost this election fair and square? No. But after these investigations are done and he lost fair and square, I'll accept the election results.
And let's talk about the technology in the investigation, because you're deeply involved in this. So for a start, we had a mix of what? So we got some mail-in votes, we got some in-person votes, and then we've got this digital, let's have a look here.
A tabulator, a vote tabulator.
Exactly, the vote tabulator. So I was looking at other stuff, so I closed that screen. What's that technology? It's the Canadian technology.
It's run by a company called Dominion.
Dominion out of Toronto.
Okay, so let's break this down for a minute, okay?
Yeah.
You've got in any typical election, you've got two kinds of vote: in-person or absentee ballot.
Right.
To get an absentee ballot, you request an absentee ballot form. You fill it out. You sign it. You mail it. You get an absentee ballot. Then there's a signature card on file in the counting room.
And this is mail-in, right? This is referred to as mail-in.
These are absentee ballots. These are mail-in ballots.
Right, mail-in ballots.
But there's a difference, because now we have a different term for this election about mail-in ballots.
That's why
I'll explain that in a second.
Exactly.
I'm talking about before 2020. If you couldn't go to the polls and you wanted to vote, you would fill out a form. You would get your absentee ballot. You would fill out your absentee ballot, and you'd need to mail it and make sure it's received before 8 p.m. on election night.
And I'm assuming you've got to have some kind of ID. You've got to prove that you're an American citizen.
When you request your absentee ballot, you are essentially, they check the absentee ballot versus the voter registration, and then you sign it, right? Okay. And then when you send in the ballot, they match the signatures. Is this Eddie Doyle? Is this the same signature? And if it's legitimate, it gets tabulated. If you make a mistake on it and one side contests to it, which typically the side that's opposite to your voting preference is going to contest to your ballot, and your ballot is going to go to an independent judge to make a decision on whether or not it should be a tallied vote. And in an average election, that's a few hundred votes.
Okay, and that goes to a state judge or a federal judge for?
It goes to an independently appointed judge that reviews these ballots.
And there's just a few hundred out of several out of
typically, like in an average polling place, it could be anywhere from 20 to 500.
Beautiful. So we got that.
So that's why in previous elections, when they say an absentee ballot, there's discrepancies in absentee ballots, it didn't make sense, and no one disputed them because it's a very small number. In 2020, in Democratic states, we had something called mail-in ballots.
Right.
Mail-in ballots was we took the entire voter registration, entire resident list, we didn't care, and we mailed everyone a ballot, fill it out, send it in.
Same registration list that we used for things like the stimulus check, I believe.
Correct?
Yes, that's right. And I remember during that stimulus check time, a lot of criticism from the left to the government because checks were mailed to dead people, right?
Correct.
Right. All right. That was from the left to the right, talking about wasting government money because they're mailing stimulus checks to dead people. Okay, keep going.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant. Great point. And so they mailed all these ballots. And, President Trump's been saying, guys, these mail-in ballots, anyone can get it. Anyone can fill it out. Anyone can submit it. And here's where this gets fishy. To anyone. Because if this was the other way around, the left right now would be burning down cities and burning down cars. The only difference between the GOP and the left, and I don't say the left, I don't mean the Democratic Party. I mean the left wing of the Democratic Party. Antifa, Black Lives Matter. I'm not talking about the traditional, Democrats, because that's not their MO.
But there's a little bit of culpability there in some of those
because
folks.
they enable it. They enable it.
Antifa
They
and Black
enable it.
Lives Matter rioters are the Marxist playbook's UIs, the useful idiots.
Right.
People. All right.
So in the mail-in ballots, those were sent in. Now, what happened is on election night, the way counting is done is, first of all, they count all the people who voted in person. Then they count all the early voting, all the early in-person voting. Like, I voted early. I went 2 weeks before the election and I voted early, and it was just like I would vote on election day. Only all of those votes are tallied. They're not counted. They're rounded up, and then they start counting them. And typically by midnight, they have an accurate count of all the in-person and early voting voters. And that typically gives you an indication, because technically absentee ballots didn't matter much.
Now, I've got a quick trajectory question. What's the problem with ID? Why are we saying no to ID when we want to
So it's
mail?
very interesting. To go to Costco, you need to show a Costco card.
Yeah, this is why I'm not understanding it. Like, I remember in the UK, it was a lot. I left when I was quite young, but you could literally bring your gas bill as long as it had your name and the address of where you lived, and it matched up with your voter card. That was something. And I think you might have had to have two pieces, something like that. So a gas bill and a credit card, or a gas bill and, most people have a driving license. But anyway, what's the deal? Why aren't we doing ID?
So in Georgia, we do IDs. I have to show my ID. There are some states that don't want you to show ID because they claim that it's racist or it's voter suppression.
How?
I don't know.
It irks me. You can't. People pull out that racist card for all sorts of reasons, and then what it does is it invalidates real racism.
Indeed.
That's the problem, because
it makes people insensitive to real acts of racism, because they go, you guys cry wolf all the time. That's racist. That's racist. Now let's get back to the mail-in ballots, and let's get back to Dominion and the tabulation. All right. Yeah. So the mail-in ballots came in. They came in late. We have now documented evidence, people on record as saying, people from the post office that said, we picked up ballots on November 4th that were backdated to November 3rd so they can be counted. That's illegal. If a ballot was dropped in the post office and it wasn't picked up by 8 p.m. on November 3rd, and it wasn't received by 8 p.m. November 3rd, it doesnn count. You have to
draw a line in the sand. You have to. Right. There has to be a date and a time that just says.
Correct. Do it. Pennsylvania, in October, lost a Supreme Court injunction because they wanted to extend mail-in voting by 6 days. And the state Supreme Court said fine, but then the U.S. Supreme Court said no, you have to, you got to segment and separate those ballots, and you got to put them in a different pile, and they didn't do it. And this is where the great debate in court's going to come. And we'll get to that in just a minute. Now I want to get to Dominion. So I've explained traditional voting. I've explained mail-in ballots. And what mail-in ballots did is, because they sent those ballots to anyone and everyone, it created a high probability of fraud. I haven't lived in Colorado since 2009. 11 years. I still got a ballot.
Really? No kidding. Yeah.
Right?
So which essentially means you could have voted twice.
Yeah, I could have voted in Colorado and I could have voted in Georgia. Now that's a crime. That's a felony, and you can go to jail for it.
Right.
Right.
And I'm probably not so much worried about that, because there's not going to be that many that would tip the scale. What I'm worried about is people in the postal service taking something and just throwing it in the garbage if they see a Trump or a Biden sign on your front.
We've seen evidence of that. We've seen boxes of votes being found in the woods in Michigan. We've seen in Arizona, we saw a bunch of ballots that were buried on a farmer's farmland, and he happened to be working his land in that specific spot, and he found a pile of votes, a pile of ballots in the middle of his farmland. And we see that traditionally happening in Republican districts. So I'm a postman in a Republican district. I know that most of these mail-in ballots are probably going to be Republican. I'll throw them away.
And the U.S. Postal Service came out and endorsed Biden. Right.
Because the Democrats were willing to give him more money to a failed government institution that has no business of being in business anymore.
So now let's move forward to the counting machine, because that's where you can manipulate massive numbers.
So I want to kick it off by saying the following. Every piece of code, every piece of software is written by humans, and as such is going to have errors and bugs. That's standard. That's going to happen. And even automated election systems will have that happen. But here's where the irregularities are starting to pop up. For example, in Oakland County, Michigan, a state councilman, went to sleep thinking he had lost his seat by 154 votes, only to wake up in the morning and get a phone call and it says, "We're sorry. They tabulated the votes wrong and he actually won by 1,432 votes."
Yeah.
Now, we saw this happen in Nevada where 6,000 votes were switched from Biden to Trump. And in Wisconsin today, 20,000 votes went from Biden to Trump. That flips Wisconsin. That flips Wisconsin to Trump. That's why Real Clear Politics came back and took Pennsylvania and took Wisconsin. And that's why Biden now in Real Clear Politics, which is really kind of what everyone kind of uses as the de facto, like they're not going to call a race until they're sure kind of deal. They now have Joe Biden at 254. And they have Trump at 214. And I don't know why they're not calling Alaska and North Carolina for Trump, because he's clearly won those two. But they're very slow in calling stuff for Trump. Very, very, very slow in calling stuff for Trump, but very quick to call stuff for Biden, like Arizona, where Fox News called Arizona half an hour after closing, right? Like we're calling Arizona for Biden, and you're like, how?
Yeah.
50% of the votes aren't even in yet, right? So now we get to the vote tabulator. The vote tabulator is essentially a piece of software that's in every precinct. And it reports the votes that are coming in to the main election decision within the state.
Well, so it's a couple of humans, hopefully. There's a couple of humans because you need both Democrat and Republican to witness. They take this piece of paper, they go, "Oh yeah, that's one for Biden, that's one for Trump," right? And then they put it somewhere, and then somebody does this, right?
No. So technically what they do is there's a piece of software where you scan every single ballot, all the ballots that get accepted. So what do the vote watchers actually do? They look at the envelope that the ballot was stuffed in. They open the ballot, they authenticate the ballot. Each side looks at the ballot, inspects it, and then they say, yes, 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 we count it, no, disputed. If one side disputes it, the ballot goes to an independent judge to be reviewed, and then whether or not it's accepted or not. Brilliant. Then they go into batches. Every vote, every county, every kind of batch has a batch number, and then those are all uploaded. And then the tabulator scans them and automatically, based on the scanning, automatically takes those votes and kicks them up, and it gives you the results. So in this batch of 10,000 votes, we had 5,000 for Trump, 5,000 for Biden. Gotcha. So far makes sense? Now, like everything technological, there's edits. It could maybe have not read a ballot may have not been picked up, and then someone needs to manually enter it. In several of those, there were what they're calling manual errors of people manually entering ballots that were maybe unread or otherwise onto those tabulators.
And this is where statistical probability should really play with even a kindergartner's brain.
Correct.
Because it's my understanding that most of those have swung one way.
Correct. So what happened is at 4 a.m., a bunch of boxes came through a bunch of precincts. People started counting them. They were told, count these ballots now, even though there weren't observers there, because they told everyone to go home. We're done counting for the night. Remember Arizona, Wisconsin, Nevada, Michigan. They said, hey, we're done counting for the night. Everyone go home. We'll be back tomorrow. Never happened before in presidential history. Never happened before in history where on the night of the election, they don't keep going. Typically on the night of the election, everyone knows you work until you're done.
This is kind of important, right? Like pull an all-nighter for crying out loud. Do you need your beauty sleep?
So in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, and parts of Georgia, they said everyone go home. And then in some cases, witnesses are reporting that they saw around 3:30 or 4 a.m. a bunch of trucks show up with out-of-state plates and drop off boxes of ballots. And all of those ballots happen to be all Biden. And no one else down ballot.
Wow.
So it's not like I voted Biden, Senate. Because think about it. The Democrats lost seats in Congress, lost seats in the Senate, right? Like they lost Alabama, but they won another seat, right? But now today, as you and I are speaking, North Carolina's been decided. Tom Tillis has taken the seat in North Carolina. The Democrat has conceded, but he's asking for a recount.
Fair enough. Good. Recount.
But
Yeah.
if Trump asks for a recount, he's a sore loser, right?
Weird.
Very, very, very weird. So the technologies had issues. Now Dominion is being used in 47 counties in the 5 disputed states. And all of those 47 counties are ones where we still have problems in getting vote totals in. So you have to understand this is a set of a lot of coincidences.
Yeah.
For any logical person, if you put all of your political opinions aside and you go, okay, first of all, they stopped counting in the middle of the night, never happened before, right? Then all of a sudden in the morning, a bunch of ballots show up, they all go one way. Okay, another anomaly. Okay, 2 times weird. 3 times weird is the software that's tabulating, and of those ballots, 99.7% of them only pick the president and no one else.
Yeah. So, and why? So likely, let's say there is complete complicit fraud going on with a group of people. In order to move that many ballots, they've got a short period of time. So they would have just tick, 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 or check, 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 since I'm in America, right? They would have just checked off, right, that one, and then just
the laziest way to create fraud. Yeah,
because
they don't have time to fill it out.
For
right?
expediency's sake, right.
Right. I don't know how they did this, right? But if I'm a criminal and I work in cyber, so I often have to think like the bad guy, I probably got a bunch of mail-in votes. I probably ballot harvested a bunch of mail-in votes where no one lives. I took those votes someplace, right? And in the days leading up to the election, I'd tell everyone, hey, fill it out the top. Boom, 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 boom. And maybe you said we only need 25,000 like those, but you've got 150,000 ballots. Well, come election night, Trump's not only winning by a little, it's a fucking landslide. It's 71 million people. Like all of a sudden you go, well, we were only prepared to do 66 million. We got to come up with more votes. So now you start filling out a bunch of ballots. Boom, 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 boom.
You mentioned something. You said ballot harvesting. Right. They had to get those ballots from somewhere. They're still legitimate ballots, right? They've got where. And I remember reading this and being a kind of a bit confused. Is ballot harvesting? So what is ballot harvesting?
So in some states it's legal. In other states it's illegal. In Georgia, for example, it's illegal. But in California, it's legal. Ballot harvesting means I can come and knock on your door because you're a registered Republican. Let's just say for the sake of this example, but typically it's Democrats that do this, okay? And I say, hey, Mr. Doyle, I know that you have a ballot. Have you filled out your ballot yet? No? Okay, well, you should fill it out right now and I'll take it for you and submit it to make sure that your vote gets in safe. That's called ballot harvesting.
But hang on. Surely then, let's say I'm a Democrat and that's happened, since you say Democrats are doing this mostly, it's still a legitimate ballot as far as I'm a citizen of America and I wanted to vote for this person.
Now, let's say you want to reverse your vote.
Right.
Now you've got a Democratic operative standing at the front door of your house. Right? It's putting you under a position where you have to vote one way or another. It's no different than the Gestapo. It's no different than what happens in other countries where, Putin wins the vote by 92%.
Yeah, I can see that so there would be some intimidation there, but I can more see it that if a Democratic person knocks on my door and I'm a Republican and I say, oh yeah, here it is, they're going to toss it out the door. If they know you're a Republican.
More easily. But a lot of times what they're doing is they're also, so one thing that's going on in Georgia right now, as we speak, is there's 132,000 ballots that are red flagged by a very weird change of address. So some people say it's a technicality, but it's not a technicality when 132,000 ballots have a change of address and they all go to similar addresses down a similar block in a similar neighborhood. So that means that someone went into the system and changed the voter registration for 132,000 people and changed the address where they mail in the ballots and then took all those ballots and completed them. Those ballots are now in court. And they're being audited and reviewed and recounted. If they get thrown out, President Trump wins Georgia.
So I need to understand that a bit better. So hypothetically, what we're saying is somebody would have gone into the electoral system, right? The government system. This is not the other technology we were talking about.
Correct.
The government electoral system. Okay. And let's say there are, I don't know, 100,000 for easy math. Okay. I'm going to take 100,000 ballots and I'm going to point them toward this mailing address. So they all go to one mailing address. Now, this mailing address is going to be a buddy of mine, right? Now, the US Postal Service would be kind of like, hang on, there's a lot of ballots going to one house. I'm trying to figure out, make it a little bit more plausible. To me, I'm thinking.
So we see already some complicity of the USPS in helping backdate, mail-in ballots.
Yeah.
Right. So no, and post office, they sort the mail, but it's all automated. You don't have a human sitting there going, wow, 17 ballots to 123 ABC Street. It's harvesting, it's putting it all in a pack. They simply they put a rubber band on it, stick it in those clear boxes, they put it on the truck, and then the USPS driver goes through and he sticks those in the respective mailboxes.
And certainly if you did that over time, you could get tens of thousands in one particular area.
Absolutely.
Right? Because the whole mail-in thing conversation started in what, June? May?
No, it started right when the COVID outbreak broke. So they started talking about this right when COVID broke. Okay. Yeah. So that's a long time to move. So the point is, it is plausible. And this is what, and we need to draw ourselves back to the technology, but this is what the Supreme, state, and federal courts will have to look at. Now, in the counting technology, let's just get to that with this machine. So the chain of custody on this Canadian technology being used to count the presidential race in the United States. So, for those of you who are new to us, both James and I are in cybersecurity. And yes, his point at the very beginning, when you make a computer do things, it's a human that's making it do things. And those humans can, of course, make it do other things. It's really as simple as that. Now, ones and zeros and coding is complicated even to me. I'm not a coder, okay? But the premise remains that if you make a computer do something, you can make it do something else. So the integrity of a machine like that, without human impartial oversight, which is tough, I don't want to say is not to be trusted, because I'm a bit of a blockchain fan, but it's not blockchain. I will say that. I don't know what technology it actually uses. And if we're not prepared to tell you what technology it uses, maybe we'll do it on a subsequent show. Like, tell us in the comments. But at a very high level, James, are you familiar with how this technology works and how someone might, in theory, be able to manipulate the data? So in the tabulator, and I say this in a way where we've seen cases now where there's, again, reports of this. And sorry, as you were talking, I'm on Real Clear Politics here, just checking a few things so I can give you some updated data. So you can manually input stuff. And that's where we've seen, like in Michigan, where they manually inputted the data incorrectly to one of the candidates. We've seen USB thumb drives get put into several of those, and all of a sudden add 8,000 some odd votes to just one candidate and nothing down ticket. So here's where the anomalies lie.
That alone is insane to me. If a USB thumb drive can be used to modify this machine's results, it's I don't want to say game over, because we still.
Well, it's not game. So here's the deal: we've always had a little bit of voter fraud and some corruption, right? It's part of any democratic process to have a little bit of corruption, right? Let's not tame democracy with perfection. Democracy is the art of imperfection and the art of the pursuit of perfection, right?
Sure.
So we've always had this kind of stuff. The only difference in this election is it's widespread. So Wisconsin, which traditionally has a 60% turnout rate, has 88. So either people were so excited about Biden and Trump that 28% over usual went to vote, or something really off is there.
Right.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
there are anomalies in this where you go, okay, and then the traditional look and feel of a ballot. A lot of people go to vote. Not everyone votes the entire ballot. Some people will only vote for president and senate. Some people vote president, senate, Congress, and they won't vote on anything local. Some people vote everything. But very seldom, very few, historically in the history of our nation, go in and vote for just the president and nothing else. And in this election, that's almost 2 million votes. So either Trump turned off 2 million people to the point that they were like, I'm going to go to the poll and I'm going to show Trump I'm just voting Biden and I'm not voting anyone else.
And I don't care about all the other things on the book, weed, whatever it is that's being legalized.
Right.
I don't care about anything else. You know what? If you're given the opportunity to vote for president, vote for Senate, and then other things like, I don't know, weed or whatever it might be, you'd want to throw in your 2 cents, wouldn't you?
So when you think of the percentages don't add up. So there's a lot of anomalies in this election, and there's a lot of anomalies that we'll never get the answers to. The idea that the Supreme Court is going to solve every anomaly is far-fetched. Now, lawsuits, the Supreme Court now has to decide whether those states can certify and who they can, and under what conditions they can certify. Okay? That's where those lawsuits are going to come into play. What's going to be very interesting is the post-certification process. So if the Republicans retain the Senate, you can bet your sweet tail that they're going to launch an investigation into voter fraud in those states. They're going to subpoena governors, secretary of states, poll workers to come testify in the Senate, come get deposed under the penalty of perjury. And it's going to be the scandal that will bedrock America until 2022. Right? The mainstream media won't want to talk about it, but the new media will. And the new media is the Daily Wire, Blaze TV, the Young Turks, Dave Rubin, PragerU, all those people that are all going to be the new media, and they're going to cover it, and people are going to go to OANN and Newsmax, and they're gonna and you're gonna see that. And this is gonna take me back to the point I wanted to make, which is you're going to see brands start to suffer financially for what happened in November come 2021.
Right.
Because there's going to be people who voted and supported President Trump who will no longer buy from someone who advertises on CNN, who will no longer buy from Facebook. And when I'm a company and all of a sudden my sales go down by 30% because my ads on Facebook aren't converting like they once was, I'm going to be like, where did my Facebook crowd go? And they went to Parler. Okay, we'll pull 30-40% of our budget and put it in Parler, and then Facebook's revenue is going to drop. And that's better than regulation. That, my friend, is capitalism.
Right.
And Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey are going to have to go to their stockholders and say, sales are down by 40%. Why? Right. Well, we lost 100 and some odd million people who spend a lot less time on our platform now because they're on Parler and they're on Rumble. And we can't do any retargeting ads and make retargeting money, right? Because they're not going to CNN. They're not going to NBC. They're not going to those big stuff. They're sticking to it, right? The Daily Wire on election night announced that they're starting in Nashville a night show with Candace Owens.
Nice.
And a crowd guest, a conservative-based nightly show. Steven Crowder had 8 million people watch his election night coverage. Steven Crowder had more viewers than CBS and ABC combined. So understand that technology, if we get to the tech town square, and now folks, let's get into technology, our passion, right? We're watching a shift. And the shift is monumental, and it's going to ripple from here across the entire world. I've got people on Parler that have connected me from Canada, the UK, Israel, Algeria, Iraq, Turkey, Belgium, South Africa on Parler, folks, not Facebook, Parler. I've got people watching my videos on Rumble from all over, and I'm monetizing them already when I've been demonetized by YouTube for a year.
Right.
So we have to kind of get to the point where we understand that new media and new tech is coming. We don't need government intervention. But now, if Biden does get elected, and if the Democrats win the Senate, we're looking at a very radical agenda, a very, very scary time where we could see regulation come to crush Parler, to crush Rumble, to support big tech, because big tech plays with the Dems.
Right.
The two Senate seats that are going to be in play in Georgia for the January 5th vote for the runoff election are going to determine whether or not we have a if Biden somehow wins this. Okay, it's not a far-fetched thing for this to happen. The Supreme Court could do three things here. The Supreme Court could say, it is what it is. That's the election. Period.
Yeah, messy as it was, that's true. They could say this is how it was and suck it up. These are the results. Go fix your system.
Right. You guys want to fix this? Take it to the House. Go to the legislative branch. We're not a legislative branch. We're a constitutional branch. Our job is to only interpret the Constitution and make sure that people's rights aren't being violated and keep big government in check. Right. That's number one.
That's one option.
The Supreme Court could force all 5 states to do a recount, excluding mail-in ballots. They could say that all mail-in ballots are null and void, whether legitimate or not. You're only going to count absentee ballots, and you're only going to count in-person voting. If that's the case, then you revert to the results that we were seeing reported on the screen at midnight on November 3rd, which would give President Trump all 6 swing states, and then he would just have a landslide victory because of that.
Right.
That's what happened in the Bush v. Gore case. The Supreme Court nulled the hanging Chad ballots in 2000 and gave Bush the win. Let's not forget that for 36 days, everyone called Al Gore president-elect.
Right. That's right. In fact, that's right. I've got the statistics right here. Let me read them out to everybody. It was, at the time, that's right. It was Bush at 242 and Gore at 271. Yeah, which is how is it sitting right now?
So Real Clear Politics has it at 259 Biden Harris, Trump Pence at 214. They haven't called North Carolina and Alaska, which are going to go to Trump. And so give me just a moment. Let me pull this up here. It's pulling up in just a moment.
And while James does that, the third thing the Supreme Court could do, I'll take a stab at this, is, of course, take a look at this and say, you know what, recount in those states, or we just go back to November 3rd at midnight, and that's what we're counting right there.
Correct. So Alaska's definitely going for Trump. He's going to get 3 electoral college votes there, right? That'll put him at 217. And North Carolina is definitely Trump. And North Carolina, I believe, is... if I'm not mistaken, it's 11. If I'm not mistaken here, folks, just a moment here. I believe it's North Carolina's 15. So that would put him at 229 plus 3. That's 232. And then all he would need is 2 more states. Pennsylvania and Georgia would put him over the top. But he would need also Arizona. So it's an uphill battle for President Trump. Of the outstanding states, he's got to take pretty much all of them to win. Right? Is it possible? I mean, in Arizona, there's about 100,000 and some odd ballots left to count. And in Arizona, President Trump is... Let me tell you, he is trailing only by... Hang on, I'm pulling this up here.
And this is at 6:25 p.m. Eastern on November 10th.
He's trailing by 14,000 votes. There's 98% reporting, and according to what I'm seeing here on Real Clear Politics, there's about another 150,000 ballots that are coming in, all from a predominantly Republican district. So there's a very good chance that President Trump will take Arizona.
Interesting. Yeah.
And if he does take Arizona, that's another 11. So that's 214. That's 225. He'll take North Carolina. That puts him at 230. Sorry, 225. That'll put him at 240. With Alaska, that'll put him at 243. And then if he takes Pennsylvania and Georgia, he's the winner.
And here's what's interesting about technology. You know, I mean, Twitter's blowing up. I'm actually on it a little less in the last couple of days. It's just a little too toxic for my liking now. But the long-form communication, as an outsider, again, I have a slight advantage in a perspective. The presidential debates, 2 minutes for the leader of the free world to describe a policy on a certain subject. I really hope the contested results from the 2020 election will lead us into a 2024. Let's have the guys on Joe Rogan for 3 hours hash it out while Jamie's fact-checking everything they say, like that when somebody stands up and says, well, I never said whatever, a video clip can come up like that, and it's like, okay, sir, what did you mean when you said that?
Trump agreed to that format.
I know
Biden wouldn't, right?
Yeah. It's just so dumb to do it the way we currently do it. But
you have to understand. You have to understand the way we currently do it has been a tradition. And the tradition been that old media does this. The tradition has also been, excuse me for what I'm about to say, but the GOP's been spineless. They always lay down when other people cheat.
Huh. We always lay down when other people cheat?
Meaning when they see irregularities, when they get into a fight with the Dems, historically the Republican Party bows down and says, for the good of the country, we're not going to make this ugly. And finally, you've got someone like Donald Trump who doesn't care. Yeah. And he's like, for the good of the country, we need to make sure that people trust elections.
Yeah.
For the good of the country, I owe 71 million Americans that voted for me to exercise within my legal rights and challenge the results.
But all you're hearing from the lamestream media is that he's trying to steal an election like a dictator.
He also stole the election against Clinton, right? But that was thanks to Russia. I mean, listen, the narrative is the narrative. And the problem I think that most people have is that big tech, the way we get our news is through blue check marks on Twitter. Yeah. And it's funny to me because I was watching a Dave Rubin video today, and he was highlighting the fact that Attorney General Bill Barr has opened inquiries into the voter fraud allegations, meaning the FBI and the Department of Justice are now actively investigating the allegations made of voter irregularity. And under that, in YouTube, it said the 2020 election has been called by the AP for Joe Biden. And I'm like, who cares? Why is that there? But that's there to constantly beat you over the head so that you accept the results that they want you to get.
Right. And so, and if it does turn out differently, I will actually say to make them complicit in inciting violence, because they know that's what's going to happen.
Well, yeah, but for the media, violence is good. It's reporters in the street with helmets. It's people watching the coverage. It's funny. It's a way for them to get more money from their advertisers and get more eyes glued on them. I, for one, don't watch mainstream media. I don't even have a cable service. And I'm telling everyone, cancel your cable, because part of your cable bill, if you get cable, goes to CNN and Fox and NBC and ABC, because that's how they make their money, right? And so cancel your cable, number one. Number two, don't buy from advertisers that advertise on channels you don't support. And if they do,
I think most people, that'll be a tough one for most people.
Buy local. Buy local. Like, I haven't bought from Amazon since the election.
Okay.
But I have called local businesses here and have bought from local businesses. I buy local now. I only support local business. Right? Like, I'm literally upgrading my home gym this weekend. I was going to order a bunch of stuff. I had a wish list on Amazon. gone.
Yeah.
I'm now looking at Facebook Marketplace to see if anyone is selling anything used, and I'm going to local sports stores to get it.
Right.
And I'll pay an extra $10 and buy it from the local sports shop, then give it to Amazon. See, the thing about it is, the left will boycott conservative businesses. But we don't do the same. And there's a thing about fighting fire with fire. Now, what's funny is 71 million disappointed Americans, not one city's burning, not one shot fired, peaceful protests, legal protests, exercising our constitutional rights. If this election does turn around, I wonder if big tech media is going to start censoring Antifa as they call people to show up in squares with riot gear and weapons and attack federal buildings or attack police stations. Right? I wonder if Twitter and Facebook are going to censor that. I highly doubt it.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't boarded up from Union Station all the way through Constitution in Pennsylvania to the White House.
Because of Trump fans.
Yeah. Right.
That's not how we go. But at the same time, we have to look at this and we have to kind of wrap our heads around something out of here that's really critical. And you're going to see this movement expand. If Joe Biden won this election fair and square, we'll accept it, we'll learn from it, and we'll be ready to retake the Congress and the Senate in 2022 and take back the White House in 2024 with a slew of amazing GOP contenders.
It's going to give Nikki Haley a great opportunity, right?
Ted Cruz, Dan Crenshaw, Ron DeSantis, Brian Kemp here in Georgia could possibly look at a presidential run. You've got some Tom Tillis. You've got some upcoming stars in the Republican Party. That are ready, that can take that. If the way the Republican Party screws this up is if they nominate another Mitt Romney. If they nominate another, John McCain, may rest in peace, an establishment Republican that stays within the status quo. We are no longer the people who accept the status quo. We saw that when we step outside the status quo and we elect outside the status quo, we get shit done. We have peace in the Middle East. We haven't been in any new wars. What do you think is going to happen with Biden within 2 years? We'll be in a war.
I've got an interesting theory as to why it is Republicans don't sort of push back in that same kind of sense. I mean, I know violence, no one should be pushing back. They wouldn't. And
we're not saying push back by violence, but we're saying fight back legally. Stand behind the president. Stand behind the fact that 71 million voters that voted for Republicans questioned this election, and stand behind your constituency.
But I want to get at something you said a few moments ago. You said that, in my words, not yours, basically, Republicans don't know how to have that kind of fight, right, in the town square, as it were. And I've got a theory here, and it's this, that the universities for the last 40, 50 years have been indoctrinated with only one type of political rhetoric, right? For courses like women's studies, courses, I'm not disparaging any of these courses. I'm simply pointing something out. Courses like women's studies, courses like the social services and so-called social sciences. I don't like that. I think it's an oxymoron to say social sciences, right? Those kinds of courses are not typically taken by somebody who has more of a right-leaning analytical mind kind of bent to them. It's taken by people who are attracted to more kind of heart matters and debate matters. So while we conservatives were in university studying economics and business, right, left-wing folks, again, I'm not saying it's bad, we're typically studying, well, how do we debate? Right? How do we structure society? I think 40 years of that has resulted in what we've got today, which is that I think conservatives have a very hard time articulating, the advantage that they bring. I'll give you a great point. So I'm in this bar in DC with this colonel, And and it started to look a little bit bad at one point. He's like, "Oh, we should have had the COVID message a lot better. We did such a bad job." And so I looked at him and said, "Well, what was the COVID message?" He said, "Well, do you know what Trump did and the administration did to get ready, after COVID hit?" And I said, "Actually, kind of not really. I'm slightly embarrassed to say so." He said, "What we did is we dedicated so many resources to this. We had about 4 pharmaceutical companies, Pfizer, as we now hear, is one of them. And we told all 4, go ahead and develop all of the batches of the vaccine while you're testing it. Then depending which one of the 4 would test accurately, and it looks right now, as of today, that it's the Pfizer one, we'll have it ready to go and we'll destroy the other 3 batches." This is a lot of money, but it's also a lot of dedication to keep the American population healthy and getting them back to work. Right? And I thought, well, that's amazing. He said, "We also," and I caught a glimpse of this in the news, "forced industry to make ventilators," like right out the gate. He said, "We're more ventilators than we know what to do with now." And it blew my mind. And it speaks to my point. We're fairly crap at fighting fire with fire in that regard. Because if you were to ask anybody, it's like, yeah, he screwed it up so badly on COVID that, that swung the election to Biden. And I think that's people's perception. And guess what? It's inaccurate. They've done an amazing job. And when that vaccine is ready, it'll be ready. We won't have to wait 6 months or a year for them to manufacture it. Right? It's there. It's on the shelf, ready to go. I was pretty impressed. That doesn't come across at all, right? In the press conferences and everything else. And granted, Trump is bombastic, right? It's just like, come on, man. Will you stop? And that's the right word, I think, for it. It's bombastic. When he's rude, when he's yelling, when he's going crazy, it's not, I'm completely deceptive and lying about this certain thing. It's, I'm smarter than everybody else in the world. I'm the best person on the planet. And that puts people off, right? That's not a cool thing. It works in WWE, right? But it doesn't work. It doesn't work with the general media. So there you go. And these things, I'm going to come back to another point you made, because I'm super encouraged on Parler and all of these alternative social media platforms, because I was wondering for a while there, thinking George Orwell, 1984, how are we going to pull ourselves out of, essentially, I think of it like this. There's a raging rapid river of death. That's what Facebook is now. It just takes you with the current, and people just keep jumping in. They've got there in a tube and they're going down and they're having a great time. And how are you ever going to get off that ride? Well, you've given me a little bit of hope here, James, because if people can get off the ride by using Parler, by using these other programs that make it the true town square, which is what we're trying to do on this show, awesome. So that's very encouraging. I signed up for Parler today. I'm going to sign up for the other ones right after this show.
So I've got, we're going to end here because we've been about an hour and a half at this. This has been a very long form episode, I would say, but it's been a very, very fun one. I want to point out something here. I'm looking through Real Clear Politics, took me to something on the National Pulse. And they have a story, and it talks about the statistical case against Biden's win. It's written by Steve Cortez. And, statistics are statistics, but we'll see. So, let's talk about Biden-only ballots. Trump campaign legal counsel Sidney Powell reported that nationwide there's been over 450,000 Biden-only ballots that were cast. Meaning those are just people who voted for Biden and didn't bother voting down ticket.
How many was that?
450,000, and all of them in battleground states. So none of that, there's no Biden-only ballots, let's say, in North Carolina. Or Trump-only ballots, sorry, not North Carolina, let's say New York or California or Texas or Louisiana or any of those.
Right.
So the other part is there's some irregularities in Georgia. And being that I'm in Georgia, there's something very interesting. Sidney Powell, by the way, for those who don't know, she was a former Department of Justice attorney. She represented Michael Flynn in his case that got thrown out in court. A very, very sharp lawyer. 10 years ago, she exposed, she was a DOJ whistleblower, exposing corruption within the Department of Justice during the years of Obama. How they were targeting churches and political adversaries through the IRS and the Department of Justice to shut them down. Very sharp lady. Has won a lot of legal fights. When she puts her mind to something, you do not want to be on the other side of Sidney Powell. You don't. And she's on this. So if you were working in a polling place and all of a sudden you sit in a room with Sidney Powell,
you're done.
Your chances are you're not going to lie.
All right.
So
Good.
Why would so many people here? I'm going to read this from the article. This is point number 3 on the Biden-only ballots. So here's where it says, I said the 450 goes again. This phenomenon appears far more prominent in battleground states, raising the false alarm for manipulation. Why would so many people vote Biden only in battleground Georgia, but not in the deeply red Wyoming, for instance? In the Peach State, meaning Georgia, President Trump's vote total almost exactly tracked the vote totals for the Republican Senate candidates, which would make sense. People went to vote for Trump. They voted for Kelly Loeffler or Doug Collins or David Perdue and so forth, separated by merely 818 votes out of 2.43 million votes that Trump earned in Georgia. But Joe Biden saw an astounding surplus of 95,801 votes that only had him on the ticket and no one else. And so Georgia, which has 2 Senate seats up, 95,000 people went and just voted for Biden but didn't vote down the Senate seats. In a highly these are Senate seats are now going for a runoff. It makes no sense. By comparison, in Wyoming, Biden only registered a surplus Biden-only take of just 725 votes over the Democratic Senate candidate there, or about 1/4 of his stake in Georgia on a percentage basis. The Biden ballots do not conclusively prove fraud, but they sure reek of something very amiss. It's a very interesting story. Steve Cortez is and does work for the Trump 2020 campaign for transparency, folks. But he brings up statistics here that raise the question of why would 95,801 Georgians vote for just the president and not vote down ticket to 2 Senate seats that are now in a runoff election that could determine the balance of the Senate.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't make any sense, man.
None. Unless those were
fraudulent ballot.
And if that's the case, and those do get unproven and get turned out right now in the recount in the state of Georgia, that would give President Trump the state of Georgia. Now, we'll end with this. Folks, there's definitely a President Trump is facing an uphill battle to win this. Not only from a perspective of the media, but also from the perspective of how the tables have been stacked. Now, if anyone can do it, it's this guy.
Tough guy can, yeah.
If anyone can do it, it's this guy. Based on the fact that he played golf on Saturday, Sunday, I saw videos of him taking pictures with weddings, parties at the golf club in Virginia where he was playing golf. The guy seemed laughing. People, that I know from within, his circle are saying that he's relaxed. He's planning ahead. He's already planning his second term. He's working on his inauguration speech. He's already looking at what changes he's going to make in the cabinet. And the confidence, by the way, of people within the cabinet. Secretary of State Pompeo today was asked about a smooth transition, and he goes, yeah, we'll have a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. And so there's stuff in here that kind of reek confidence that unless those guys knew something that we probably don't know, because why would you expose it before you take it to court? Why would you let the other side know how you're going to hit them?
Right. And while I hope this is true for my sake, simply because I'm a conservative guy, what I really hope comes out of this is what you said earlier on in our show. We might get a legitimate third party out of this debacle.
We will.
And I think for the sake of America and Americans, it's in everybody's best interest to know that we can't have this much disruption to when we have an election. I mean, this should be everybody's problem. And of course, I'm saying it, as a conservative, I'd be very happy. But you know what? If it turns out after the Supreme Court says, you know what, Biden, okay, I'm disappointed, okay, right? And let's go for that third party. And then I'll give the, I keep forgetting which Weinstein brother to give the shout out, whether it's Brett or Eric Weinstein, a couple of members of the Intellectual Dark Web. Eric started Unity 2020, that one?
Yep.
Okay, so it was a very interesting thought. Big social media shut it down, fine, whatever, it's not fine. But I really want to push at least an agenda of somebody who's trying to say, is there another way we can do this? And I thought it was a very interesting idea.
So you'll see that. I think you're going to see the third crazy wing of this come out of the Democratic Party with AOC and Bernie Sanders and Ilhan Omar and the squad. That's going to be the legitimate third party.
That one? Really?
Yes. And the reason I say that is because my generation, the millennials, are fucking idiots. Because it's proven that Generation Z was won by Trump. First-time voters voted for Trump overwhelmingly over Biden.
Huh.
Biden won the millennial vote. So they're going to be the legitimate, because I think that the Democrats watched the seats that they lost in the House. They're probably going to lose the runoff elections in Georgia. Not probably, they will lose the runoff elections in Georgia. And so what will happen is the people have overwhelmingly in this election said no to the leftist policies, right? They said no to defund the police. And a lot of the Democrats that are in purple states and purple counties and are going to start going like, hey, we're not backing this agenda. We're going to lose our seats.
Right.
We're going to lose our seats. While you and I were talking, Tillis obviously won the North Carolina Senate seat. Folks, I know this is the Tech Town Square, and we talked a little bit about technology today. We talked a lot about the election, but this is, it's on everyone's top of mind, folks.
It's November 10th. Let's just roll with
it. It's on everyone's top of mind. And I would urge everyone to go to the Real Clear Politics website and follow that, and because they have everything on here. They've got stuff from The Atlantic, which is, to me, in my opinion, garbage, and NBC News, which is even more garbage, to the National Pulse and the DC Examiner and Vox and the Federalist and so forth. And so at least you'll get a little flavor of everything.
And we promise to talk more about tech on next week's podcast.
Yeah, next week we'll come back and hopefully there'll either be a president or whatever the case may be. But even if not, and I don't think there will be, I don't think this is going to get resolved until at least early December, folks. Tune in, strap in. This is going to be a ride. The media is trying to play it off like Biden's already president. The guy's given, speeches every single day, but he's not answering any questions, which should make everyone kind of wonder why the guy won't do a press conference if he just won the presidency. Why isn't he answering questions? Why is he coming in, talking for 10 minutes and leaving? Is that his capacity? Is that all he's able to do? If he's going to be our president, he ought to answer questions from the media, because most of them ask him softball questions anyways. So
sure, that's the whole campaign. Well, and what we can do in the Tech Town Square is we can talk more about how technology might be able to provide let's do this, since it's still the political season next week. We'll talk about anything next week, don't worry, something amazing will happen. But what we could discuss, and tell us if you're interested in the comments, what we could discuss is, look, how can we have more of a long-form conversation with people that, run government, right? That run things that impact our lives. And I think technology will only be the foundation of this kind of platform, however we might want to put it together. So that'll be an interesting thing for us. And then how we can more instantly, I think, fact check, right? That's probably a big one for us. It's like fake news. Before Trump said the words fake news, I wasn't even thinking about news being fake. I mean, obviously, I know there's political bias with different cable news shows, which is why I cut cable years ago. But, how can we use technology so that we can almost instantly evaluate news? And then people won't be so confused, because guess what? There is something that is truth. And we just need to get to that. And that can be agreed upon. Once we know what a scientific truth, an undoubtful truth is, we have to rally around whatever that is. We just have to, whether we like the truth or not. And I think that might bring a lot less excitable people to the town square. All right, James, finish us off.
All right, guys, we're going to be doing the show on Rumble. So you'll see it here on YouTube. We're also going to be posting all 3 of our episodes on Rumble, where we're probably going to get knocked out of YouTube simply because we're talking elections and so forth. So we'll be moving to Rumble, which is the new YouTube, uncensored, uncanny, a lot of fun. We'll also be on Parler. That's where you can find me. My user handle on Parler is JamesCISO. You can catch me there. Eddie, do you know what your Parler handle is?
I don't. I literally just signed up for it yesterday. But you can always look me up on LinkedIn. It's easy. Edwin Eddie Doyle, Manhattan. Boom. I'm the only one.
All right. That's it for us here, folks. The Tech Town Square. A lot of elections today. One thing that you should know about Eddie and I is we're going to let you know who we are from the very get start. All opinions expressed in this episode are our own, do not represent any organizations we work with or for. This is simply 2 guys having a conversation, wanting to open a town square and help you express yourself, whether you agree or disagree with us. We welcome you, and we welcome the ability to have a debate as long as it's respectful and within the boundaries of facts and not insults. Until next time, folks, my name is James Azar, Eddie Doyle. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for tuning in. Comment below, subscribe, and another episode coming next week.
See you soon. Good luck.
Take care.